Smooth-On participates in a number of trade shows around the world each and every year. In order to do that, it requires a lot of trade show displays, some of which we make ourselves, and others customers donate to us, which we greatly appreciate. But in this video, we're going to show you how to make a custom countertop that was an upgrade to a current display. Now, this required a couple of unique tips and tricks that we utilized, but it's also something that you can use in your own countertop projects. The display consists of two curved countertops. One side has a complete counter, while the other side only covers half of the wall. Since these curves are quite unique, we needed to template the walls to ensure a proper fit. We used strips of panel board to make our templates. The next step was to create custom edge band molds. We wanted to keep with the Art Deco style of the wall panels, so we chose a dental pattern from a local hardware store. We modified the design to fit our countertop depth. We then constructed a mold box for the model, and since we did not want any seams in our edge band, and our outside curvature was larger than 8 foot, we used 2 lengths of trim for our mold box. We clamped the mold walls to the model to ensure a tight fit, so that no rubber would leak under. Super Seal and Universal were used to seal and release the model. For a more detailed video on this process, check out our website. We're going to use Task 16 because it has a relatively short pot life of just 6 minutes, yet it's still a strong and durable 80 durometer rubber. That will allow us to cut mitered edges and still give us a clean, crisp finish. So why don't we figure out how much material we need? We'll use our online calculator. Our material calculator can be found on our homepage. Simply click Material and Conversion. Next, we choose the casting estimator. We select Task 16 from the drop-down menu and type in our dimensions in our volume calculator. Then we hit Calculate. Once we have our total, we dispense Task 16 by weight. Make sure to mix or shake both part A and B before dispensing. Once it's thoroughly mixed, dispense into a clean bucket and mix it again. Since this is a long, narrow model, and we have a relatively short pot life, we start on one side and pour the material down the length of the model. We always try to pour on the material that has already been dispensed. This cuts down on turbulence and ultimately less bubbles in the material. We demolded the Task 16 edge band after 90 minutes, but we stored it on a straight, flat surface for 24 hours before we used it.
We placed the edge molding on the melamine and lined up the reference marks transferred from the template to create the general radius needed. A continuous line was drawn to easily see where the placement of the edge molding needs to be while attaching it to the form. We carefully cut miters for the 4 corners. A backer support behind the rubber may be needed to keep the edge molding in place while cutting because it is flexible. Attach the edge molding to the melamine blocks cut to the height of the edge molding with brad nails and hot glue the blocks in place. Use foam knockouts for the holes in the countertop to accept the pergola support structure.
Okay, now we have our edge band molding laid out according to our template. So before we move on, why don't we talk a little bit about the mix design?
Okay, we're going to be using our ECC-Mix so that we can create a fluid yet strong mix that will follow and flow into capture all the detail of our edge form. We're going to be adding some mirror chip glass into the face coat so that we can expose that later through processing.
And since we're doing an ECC mix, we want the countertop to be a little bit lighter. We don't want to cast the full thickness of our edge band molding. So we've embedded foam into the back of it, and we use these strips of plywood to keep the foam in place when we're vibrating so it doesn't float to the surface. To keep the plywood bridge in place, we're going to attach it to the plywood that's already attached to the table. So why don't we get started?
All right, sounds good, let's go.
All right.
Here you can see our good friend Ernie spraying Aquacon release agent into the form. Aquacon is our water-based release agent designed specifically for the decorative concrete market. Ice is used to chill the water enough to allow the mix to remain fluid with the least amount of water reducer added. This is not necessary, but will add working time to allow easier placement of the concrete in the form, thus reducing stress. To the water we added our pigment to allow pigment to become dispersed more quickly. Next we added all but one of our bags and mixed thoroughly. When working with concrete powders, it is mandatory to use dust collection and filter mask to reduce the risk of exposure. Water Reducer 420 was added to gain fluidity. The amount will vary from one day to the next, but you will want to maintain a fluid mix, not dry and clumpy. The final bag was added and fluidity adjusted with water reducer. 100 pounds of material was removed from the mixer and dispensed into a mixing tub. The glass mirror chips were added and mixed thoroughly. We are using this for our face coat, which will be ground during processing to expose the glass. This mixture was placed in the forms and allowed to flow, covering the entire surface. The table was vibrated to remove air from the face coat. We then added the PVA 100 fibers slowly to incorporate throughout the mix to avoid clumping. We then filled the form to the top of the foam knockout with this fibered mix. We placed the foam inserts and secured with the wooden cleats. We continued filling the form and vibrating the table. We massaged the edge mold face to break free any trapped air bubbles while vibrating. This is important to help break the surface tension of the mold surface, which may have air trapped, especially because of the square edge detail. After 5 hours, the concrete was firm enough to cover. We covered the countertop with curing fabric to allow moisture to remain in the concrete, not condense on the underside of plastic sheathing. We covered with multiple layers of insulating blankets to retain the heat generated from the cement hydration. This allows the concrete to cure faster, thus gaining strength quicker. Because we covered with insulating blankets, the concrete temperature was able to spike to somewhere over 110 degrees. At this temperature range, it will be able to be demolded after only 16 hours, and we can start to grind the surface. We ground the backside to the height of the edge form and the foam insert. This is the best time to make your countertop dimensionally correct while it is still in the form, as you have the form walls for a thickness reference. We removed the edge molding very easily, revealing the duplicated detail. It is at this time the rubber edge form can easily be cleaned and ready for the next casting. We removed the foam insert without any difficulty because we wrapped the foam in plastic. This is a good trick you will want to remember. We removed the concrete countertop from the casting table and flipped onto processing carts. We dry ground the initial layer to expose the mirror glass. We used a 7-inch angle grinder equipped with a dust collection system to catch the fine particles. We left a step in the initial edge molding of a 3/16 of an inch. This is the amount we will grind from the surface to expose the glass mirror chips. This produces a nice transition from the surface to the edge radius without distorting the radius. We wet polished with a planetary polisher, starting with 30 grit metal bonded diamond pads and followed up with 50, 100, and 200 grit resin bonded diamond pads. After this, we will use bone paste to fill any voids in the concrete surface. Bone paste works great and is easy to use. We mix the bone paste with the ash pigment from the Ultrafine Pigment Blend series. Wiping in a circular motion will help to force the slurry into the pores, and then scrape the excess with a drywall knife. Be careful to not get excess on the detailed edges, because it may be difficult to remove from the crevices. After filling all voids with the bone paste, we allowed them to dry overnight. The next day, we polished with 200 grit diamond pads. In order to maintain flatness, be careful to notice the amount of exposure present. Once the countertop was completely dry, we applied Buddy Rhodes RPS sealer in the matte version. We wanted a sealer with excellent stain protection in a low gloss appearance for the abuse it may see during a busy trade show. We wetted the floor to keep dust down in the area while sealing. Following the sealing instructions, we applied 3 primer applications, followed by 3 finish applications. The sealer should be allowed to fully cure for about 2 or 3 days, depending on humidity and ambient temperature of the environment. Once the sealer has fully cured, we set the countertop into place. Our display is now ready for shipment.
Okay, we have our new countertop on our existing display. How do you think it turned out, Jim?
I think it turned out great. I love the custom edge detail from our edge forms, and the exposed glass mirror is a great addition. I think it's going to look great.
Me too. So why don't we finish getting it packed up, and we hope to see you at our future trade shows.
Yeah, love to see everybody there.